All right, hello everyone. We had a lot of people signed up for this, so hopefully they don't come in through the whole thing, but I will do my best to multitask if need be. So everybody is muted. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box and I'll get to them after the presentation. Hello and thank you for joining me for this horse talk on how to testify in the North Dakota legislature. I know for me personally, I feel like the last 3 years were both a huge refresher in high school civics and then also an advanced course, like the things we didn't talk about in high school civics. I'm going to try to keep this talk that simple. So if you have questions, again, feel free to add them into the chat and I'll answer them after the presentation. I want to give a little background on the way our North Dakota legislature works. I was born and raised in Chicago. So if you're like me, what I'm going to say may seem a bit odd. North Dakota, along with Montana, Nevada, and Texas, hold legislative sessions every other year. I'm sorry. Um, in North Dakota, our legislators meet for 80 days every 2 years. Let me just see. Twenty 2025 is obviously an odd year, so our legislators came back into session on January 7th. The session has to wrap up by May 2nd. This is why I'm feeling particularly antsy. If we don't get this legislation passed in this session, we won't have another chance until 2027. And then just for reference, this person here on the right is Senator Josh Boucher. And then the person in the middle is House Majority Leader Mike LaFleur. Both of them are sponsoring our bill and our resolution. So here's how it works. The state of North Dakota legislature is made up of a House and a Senate, just like our federal government. We have 47 senators, one from each district in the state, and 94 House members, two from each district. 141 men and women will come together to pass a budget and make laws for the next 2 years. This year, the legislature is looking at about 1,400 pieces of legislation. That's a record number. In 2023, they were, I think, right at about 1,000, and that was a new record for them. So this year it just keeps increasing. So they're under a lot of pressure. So this is why CHWHA is staying in constant contact with our legislators. You can easily see how our two small pieces of legislation can be lost in a sea of 1,400 pieces of legislation. So this again, for reference, is from left to right. North Dakota's House Majority Leader, Mike LaFleur. In the center is Representative Vicky Steiner. And on the right is Senator Dean Rummel. These three are also sponsoring the legislation for us. And these three are actually my representatives here in Dickinson. We're about maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes from Theodore Roosevelt National Park. I'm going to reference Schoolhouse Rocks. I'm just a bill a lot through this presentation. Not just because I was a child who grew up in the 70s and this catchy little tune is forever etched in my memory. It truly is the easiest and simplest way to explain this process. While the Schoolhouse Rock video explains the federal legislative process, the state process follows the same pattern. So I thought because I was going to reference it, I will also just show the video for anyone who may not have seen it, because it really is the simplest way to explain things. So hopefully this works. Okay, give me a minute to get back to my screen. So, a bill is defined as text that calls for change or an addition to a current law. And when I was putting together the presentation, I found this one that says a bill is an idea for a law. So those are just different ways to think about what's happening and where we are in the process. So the legislative process will follow like this. First, the legislation is drafted, and that's something that we've been working with Vice Policy Group for probably um, about a year now, getting that together. So, Ben, my goodness, Ben, a second. Okay. So, we've been working for about a year on drafting the legislation. The last couple months, we've been going back and forth with our legislators. So we submitted something to them. They sent it back with some changes that they wanted to see. And then we just kind of worked out an agreement from there. So once it's drafted, then it goes into here in North Dakota, and I'm sure this happens other places too. It goes to legal counsel where they look at the legislation and make sure that what's being proposed is within the laws and the guidelines of North Dakota. So that happened already, and now our bill has been introduced. So it was introduced into the Senate. So every piece of legislation starts in one chamber, either the House or the Senate. As I said, ours will be starting in the Senate. The legislation is introduced and then it's assigned to a committee. So North Dakota has one of the most open legislatures in the nation. Every bill has a public hearing before a legislative committee. After the public hearing, the committee votes on the bill. The committee either gives the bill a do pass or a do not pass vote. If the committee gives a do not pass vote to the bill, that's it. It dies in committee, as we watched in the Schoolhouse Rock video. Since all legislation had to be submitted by 120 if it was going through the House and 127 for the Senate, there's no do-over. So we can't submit legislation again until 2027. So that's why it's really important that everyone testify and that we get this to pass. If the committee gives a do pass vote, the bill goes before the full House or Senate for another public vote. Then the whole process starts over again in the other chamber. So for us, it will go over to the House, and then there will be another committee meeting and then a House vote. I found this graphic and I thought it was helpful. So this is talking federally, but if you just replace the president with governor, it's the same thing essentially. If the second chamber makes any changes to the legislation, it has to go back to the chamber that introduced the legislation to make sure they agree. If they don't agree on the change, then it goes in front of a conference committee where 3 members from each chamber meet to agree on the final language in the bill. The language has to be the same on both bills for each chamber. If both chambers pass the same version of legislation, then the bill goes to the governor for his signature or veto. Hopefully now you can see why we've been meeting with people on all levels of the North Dakota legislature, from the governor's office, state legislators, even our federal legislators, to let them know what's happening and what we're proposing and to get their suggestions and advice. So the way that we get to have our voice heard during this is through the public committee hearings. So what you need to know, you do not have to live in North Dakota to submit testimony. You can submit testimony either, it all needs to be submitted written, but you can also testify virtually or in person. So if you're going to testify virtually or in person, I do ask that you let us know. We're working with our legislators to streamline the testimony. You can also just come to watch the testimony if you live close by. But if you're thinking about testifying personally, in person or virtually, really please let me know, because we are putting together a group of people who will be testifying. While you don't have to live in North Dakota, the forms are going to ask you where you're from. An issue like the horses is something that is taken on, the entire globe is watching this and is welcome to testify. If we were testifying about something like North Dakota property taxes, living in another state may not carry as much weight, but it will carry weight here. So it really is important that everyone testify. So the first thing you need to do is write your testimony. In the 2023 session, I believe the horses had over 300 pieces of testimony submitted. That was more than any other bill that session. So I'm really counting on all of you again to give even more this session, because your testimony does matter. The committee will read each and every piece of testimony. They're looking for original testimony, no form letters. So I'm not offering a form letter. This is just your own testimony and whatever you think the committee needs to know about the horses. So think of it this way. This is your chance to tell your story about why these horses are important, why the state should be involved to provide some oversight to the wild horse management, and why you think they should have federal protection. Again, and this is the same as with the EA when we were talking about that. If you have scientific information to share, feel free to share it. If you have historical or any other professional, scholarly information to share, feel free to share it. But again, if you're not a scientist or historian or other profession, this isn't the time to pretend to be one. Your simple testimony will carry weight still too. So this is kind of what the start of your testimony should look like. And again, we're not looking for form letters. This is just kind of I guess a common sense way to do this. So chair and committee members, my name is Christine Command. Please insert your own name. We don't need a bunch of testimony from Christine Command. I am the president and co-founder of Chasing Horses Wild Horse Advocates from Dickinson, North Dakota. Again, you don't have to be with an organization. You could be Sue Smith from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So you don't need to belong to an organization. I am here today to ask that you vote in favor of Senate Bill 2331. This bill would create the formation of a working group that would work with Theodore Roosevelt National Park to help manage the wild horses. The resolution before you is asking for our federal legislators to help give federal protection for this herd, since they are not protected under the Wild and Free Roaming Horse and Burro Act. From here, you go into your story and your reasons why you feel these pieces of legislation should pass. This is the place where, if you're out of state, you would let legislators know why this legislation and the horses are important to you. So, for example, you could say, we took family vacations there, childhood memories, or even things like, my health prohibits me from traveling there, but the photos shared online brighten my day. I mean, whatever it is about these horses that means something to you, that make you feel a need to testify, you just need to say that. So whatever your reason is, this is your chance to tell your story. How long should your testimony be? As long as you need it to be. I also ask that you be considerate of the legislators. Again, they have 1,400 pieces of legislation coming in, and they will read each and every piece of testimony. So you should also make sure that you're polite in your testimony. I know advocates get very passionate when we talk about what's happened to our wild horses on our public lands, but our legislators are not the ones we're upset with. They're actually the ones we're going to for help. So just make sure that you're remembering that as you're writing your testimony. Remember gratitude. Thank the legislators at the end for their time and their consideration. So you need to make a PDF file of your testimony. And so I put this together kind of quick, and hopefully it's not too confusing, because I know for some people, when you say you have to make a PDF file, they freeze up. It's really very easy. It's as simple as going into your text document, typing out whatever your testimony is, and then you would go in to your file, hit where it says print, and you can just do, here as it says, save as a PDF, or you can do a Microsoft print to PDF. and then it will ask you for a name of your file, and you can name it whatever you want, and then it will save on your computer. But you need to have that for the testimony part. So for this next part, I am going to share my screen a different way this time. I'm going to go to the North Dakota Legislature's website so that we can look at that. So there's a couple different things. There's a lot you can do on this website. There is a place on here too, and I didn't look it up beforehand, but there is a place where you can actually watch the testimony when it's being heard, and it might be under the session information. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find your bill. So we're in the 2025 session, and our bill number is 2331, and you would search. So here it's going to bring up Senate Bill 2331, gives you an overview, who it's introduced by. So Senator Boucher, Senator Kessel, Representative LaFour, Senator Rummel, Representative Steiner. You can also click on these, as you can see, so you can see about that legislator, how long they've been in the North Dakota legislature. You can see other bills they're sponsoring if you're interested in any of that.
Hey, Chris, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I don't think any of us are seeing that screen.
Okay. Let me try this. Let me try one more time. Thank you, because I was clicking away. Yep. All right. Now can you see? Can you
It
see
says
now?
you've started screen sharing. Yep, there you go. That'll work.
All right, so I'll just start over again really quick. So this is when you go to ndlgis.gov, it will give you this screen here. So you'll go over here to where it says find a bill. The year is 2025, and you'll enter the 2331 search, and then it'll come up with this screen. So on here, it's telling you the sponsors. So again, Senator Boucher, Kessel, LaFour, Rummel, Steiner, and you can click on that, their names, like I said, and you can see who they are, how long they've been in the legislature. Here it'll tell you bills, any videos that they've been a part of, and like testimony and things like that. You can see. The title of it is a bill to act, create, and enact a new section to Chapter 54-60 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to the Theodore Roosevelt National Park Working Group, to provide a report and to provide an appropriation. The current status is it's introduced, so and it's been referred to the State and Local Government Committee. So that's the committee that will be hearing testimony. This will give you different versions as it goes along. And if you click on that, it will bring up the actual bill so that you can look at it. So you can read it for yourself. And then actions, again, we're right at the beginning. So it's just been introduced into the state and local government. And if you click on that, it will show you that committee, again, if you're interested in that and who's on that committee. Video will be if there's any video. So when people testify, the video will be here. If the committee talks about anything to do with this bill, it'll be in here. And I'll show you that on another bill in a minute. And then under hearings, you can see no hearings have been scheduled yet. So this was just introduced and we just got a bill number. But under hearings is where you're going to find the place to testify. And so I'm going to show you that on another bill in just a minute. And then the testimony tab, this is where your testimony will be. Your testimony becomes part of the public record, and anyone in the public can look at your testimony. So don't let that prohibit you. I don't think that many people go through and look at your testimony, but just know that it is a public document. So I'm going to look at another bill just to show you how to testify, since I can't do it on this screen. And this is Senate Bill 2312. So you can see it's been introduced, and it does have a committee hearing set for 9 o'clock on 129. So if you go under the hearings tab now, you'll see a place here to submit testimony. So when you click that tab, it'll tell you again, this is when the committee will be hearing. And then it'll tell you a little bit about it, when the deadline is to submit the testimony. So it's 8 a.m. on the 29th. And then it gives you some directions on how to do that. And we'll go through that now. So you're going to put in your name, first, last name. If you're with an organization, if you're not, then leave that blank. your email address and then confirm that. And then they want a phone number and then your city and your state. And then you're going to scroll down and it's going to ask you the testimony provided. So we are all hopefully voting in support of. So you would click that box. You can also be in opposition to or neutral. But in supportive is what we want. And then your testimony format. Are you only going to submit written testimony? Do you plan on testifying remotely? Do you plan on testifying in person? No matter what, you have to submit your testimony. So then you'll just browse your files and you will do sample testimony. It will attach it to there. And then if you have other files that you want to add, you can add them too. So if you had some kind of proof or documents you wanted them to look at with your testimony or something you reference in there, you can add that. And it says you can add up to 5 files. That's as much as they'll let you do. So then you just hit submit. It's not going to submit mine because I didn't put my name and everything in there, but that's how easy it is. So the biggest thing is just making sure that you take the time to testify, to type out your testimony, make your PDF file and upload it there. So back here. So I do hope that you guys enjoyed Bill's journey, and I hope that you're more comfortable testifying. It really is a simple process. I will be there testifying in person. I've talked to a few people who will be testifying, hopefully virtually. But it really is a simple process. It's an important process, and it's our right as citizens to give them our opinion. And the more that they hear from you again, the more likely they are to pass this. It carries a lot of weight. And when I talked to one of our legislators and asked him, how do we get the word out? How do we explain things? How do we, you know, get them to understand how important this is and all the different layers? He told me the biggest thing was to have people testify. That if he said, if 50 people are testifying in favor of this and nobody's testifying against it, that carries a lot of weight with the committee. And I said, well, I think over 300 people testified last time. He said, well, there you go. So it helps them make their decision. So if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to take them now. Let's see. I think it's pretty cut and dry, but again, if anyone has questions, just put them into the chat. I don't see any. No. You don't have to register to just watch the meeting.
I
You
have
can
a
just go.
question.
Hmm?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am just wondering if I click the option submit virtually and written, if I happen to not be able to, I don't know when the hearing will be. Um, if I am not able to make the virtual meeting on Zoom, is my written testimony still going to count?
So when it does open up for testimony, um, they will be able to, you'll be able to see, they'll know then when the committee hearing is, so you'll know. So if you're going to say that you're going to testify in person or virtually, again, please email or PM us so that we know that you're going to come and testify. Again, we're just trying to streamline it. I don't know what kind of a window they're going to give for testimony for this. So we're really trying to make sure that we streamline it so that people don't come there in person to testify and we run out of time or anything like that. Or if there are people there testifying in person, sometimes they'll take them before they'll take the virtual testimony. And there are some really important people that we have testifying virtually that can't make it in person. So again, we're really trying to streamline the in-person and virtual testimony. So, but you will know that when you submit your testimony.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
I would guess that either way, your written testimony will be submitted. So if you couldn't make it in person, you should still be able to, they will still read your written testimony.
Okay.
And the link to testify is ndlegis.gov. And I will put that on the video when we put it on YouTube so that people can see that. But again, it's a pretty simple process. It's just explaining why you want to have this legislation passed. There will be this bill 2331. And then as soon as we get our resolution number, I will share that too. And the resolution is going to just be asking the federal government for federal protection for the horses. So we'll have a resolution number for that too.
Chris, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
For some reason, apparently it's not showing up in the chat. I was wondering if you could just spend a minute explaining why you feel the working group is so important, since that's the gist of the bill that we're testifying in support of.
Yes, I can do that. So for those of you who don't know, the state of Colorado um, recently passed legislation forming a working group to work with the BLM to manage the wild horses in their state. So we're looking to replicate that here in our own capacity. I mean, obviously, we're not dealing with the BLM and things will be a little bit different, but it kind of plays along the lines of what Governor Burgum said in January of 2023. Whatever resources the park needs to manage the horses, the state of North Dakota has it, right? If they need science, if they need money, you know, if we need to maybe work maybe more on promoting tourism, whatever it is. So this legislation pulls together stakeholders from all across the state, including advocates, people from the governor's office, our legislators, tourism, the town of Medora, to come together to work with the park to manage the horses in the best way. So we know, I believe that everyone on this call has concerns on the park's ability to manage the horses in a humane way that we agree with, because we just spent 3 years fighting to keep the horses in the park. And then in October, they did a pretty nasty roundup where we don't even know what the ramifications of that are yet, because they were going to hand inject every mare with Gonacon. And according to their records, they only hand injected maybe a third of them, but trust issues are broken so badly. I mean, I don't know that we can believe that. So they've been aggressively using Gonacon, and it looks to us like they're getting ready to just let this herd die out, basically. So the other piece of this is that the resolution is asking for federal protection. And there are 2 other national parks that have federal protection, the Ozark horses in Missouri, and then there is also the Shackelford Banks horses in Cape Lookout National Seashore. And in both of those pieces of federal legislation, they name an organization that the National Park Service has to work with in order to manage the horses. And so our hope is, as we move forward with federal legislation, that this is the organization that's named in that federal legislation. So this is a very important step toward federal legislation. That makes it a little bit different than the Colorado piece, because in Colorado, the BLM comes to the meetings, but at the end of the day, they're still able to go ahead and do whatever it is they want. So that's what we feel is missing. And the first step is to form this group, and then we continue working with Senator Hoeven's office on federal legislation. So I hope, does that answer, Castle?
Yes, but would you care to comment on whether or not you think the park would support this if it passed? And is there any leverage to encourage them to work with the working group?
Well, I think that they would be strongly encouraged to work with the working group. This is something that Senator Hoeven has also said, right? He has gone back to the park and to the people and said, I keep telling the park they need to work with the public, they need to talk to the stakeholders, they need to work with the advocates, they need to be transparent, and that's exactly what this does. Again, the BLM goes to the meetings in Colorado, for lack of better words, they don't want to look like jerks, right? So the state is trying to work with you, and are you going to say no? The park absolutely can. It's not going to look good on them. Do they have to listen at this point? They don't. That's where the federal piece comes in. So, and I do think the resolution will also state something to the effect of, having the park have to work with this working group. So I think it's the best way to give this longevity. The state of North Dakota obviously is going nowhere, and this will give them longevity to be able to work with the park. So, but the federal piece is the more important, is just as important, I'm going to say, because it will give the power to the state then and to this working group, and and make the park have to come to that table. So, of course, I don't think the park is happy about this at all. I did send a copy of the legislation to Superintendent Daniels. She was at a Medora City Council meeting. Well, she had sent an email to a Medora City Council meeting. She couldn't make it in person, but saying that she would be at the one next month. So I will be there next month to see. But she was urging them to not pass any legislation or resolutions because she had something to say. So I'm sure the park is going to kick and scream as much as they can because they want to continue doing what they're doing and not answering to anybody.
May I ask one more thing?
Mhm.
Follow up. So the resolution is part of the package that you're seeking testimony on, correct?
Right.
That's gonna,
It'll have its own that will have its own, it'll be like SCR, whatever the number is. So it'll be Senate concurrent resolution, whatever number it's assigned. So it'll have a separate testimony screen. Our legislators are trying to make it so that both pieces go in front of the same committee at the same time because they do kind of go together. You know what I mean?
so
The Go
should we
ahead.
address both in the written testimony?
You can, because you can just upload the testimony to both if it's the same. You know what I mean? It's asking for, I mean, there is a possibility that one piece passes and one doesn't. I mean, that's always a possibility. There's a possibility that neither one pass. I mean, that's why the testimony from everybody is so important. Um,
When
but
will
you
that
can't,
be available?
I would guess that sometime, I would hope within the next week or so, we would have the committee assigned. Again, they have 1,400 pieces of testimony that they're going through. And I know that the first um, committee hearings that were happening were things that were introduced mostly from agencies within the North Dakota government. So they were working on a lot of that. And I know a lot of budget stuff is in there right now, and property tax issues and stuff. So as soon as I know that it's there, I will let you guys know so that you can start submitting your testimony. I'll keep watching it, and our legislators will let us know too. So
Okay,
Can
thank you. That's helpful.
can you please explain a little bit why they did not pass this legislation before 2 years
it's not,
ago?
this was not submitted 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we only submitted a resolution asking for the state was asking the federal government for help to keep the horses in the park. So the first fight was just to keep the horses because the park was just getting rid of all of them. That was their proposed action.
Okay, so did they not keep the horses? Because I'm sorry, I don't have the whole picture yet.
So 3 years ago, the park put out an environmental assessment and said that their plan was to eliminate the entire herd from the park. So we fought to keep the horses in the park. We won. We won
Oh,
last
so they're
April.
there. So they're still there. Okay, perfect.
They are there, but they're under the management of the Park Service alone, and we're questioning if that's the right decision. We don't feel that it is. We feel that the state should have a part in that.
Okay.
So Kim, to answer your question, when the committee assigns a date for the committee hearings, it'll say on there when the deadline is for the written testimony. And Jeanette, you can read the bill on the website now. It's on there, ndlegis.gov. And if you look up the bill 2331, when you go into there, it'll show you a copy of that. We also put that in our blog the other day. And I think it was called Senate Bill 2331. So a copy of that is there for you to download also. Anybody else have any questions? Like I said, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Um, there's no there's no format on what it has to be. It doesn't have to be scientific, historical. It just has to be your own words, your own testimony on why you think this is important and why you think the state should form this committee. So the plan then from here would be for this committee would meet a few times over the next couple of years. They would kind of get their bearings on what does the committee do, what are their what is their purpose going to be, and then what are the biggest concerns that we have regarding the management of the horses, and then they'll come back in front of the committee, in front of the legislature in 2027 and say, okay, the group was formed. Here's what we decided our purposes and the things that we're going to do, and this is what we think the priorities should be, and this is what we'll need a budget to cover those priorities, and this is what that is. So they'll have a better idea once they meet and just kind of get together. It's new. So I will also say that Governor Burgum, who now is going on to hopefully be our Secretary of the Interior, did say to a local news station that he was looking at what was happening in Colorado, because we had mentioned it to his office. We met with his office too before they left and showed them the legislation. And they had said that if they were in office, they would have passed it. And this would have been something that they would have, would have been looking forward to. But he did look at what was happening in Colorado, and he said that, going into the interior, he's looking at what's happening in Colorado as possibly an innovative way to manage wild horses, where everybody can kind of win. So we'll see what happens, and we'll just move forward one step at a time. So does anybody else have any questions? All right, well, I'm going to end the horse talk then, and thank you guys again for coming. I will put this on YouTube in case you missed anything. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.